every year here at the Church of St. Mary, we celebrate well over 75 baptisms each year at that very font. Lots of kids, lots of infants, lots of life, lots of hope, lots of promise. People who become, as infants, children of God. And even though we celebrate that number of baptisms every year, I never tire of celebrating the sacrament of baptism. It's one of the great joys of being a priest. Why do I enjoy it so much? Well, because every baptism is unique. What's unique about every baptism? Well, certainly the one to be baptized is what makes every baptism unique. Every one has a different name. Every one has a different family. Every one has different people who gather around this person in prayer and in praise to God. Every baptism, unique, different, significant, special. But every baptism likewise has lots of things that you will see common at every single baptism. You will see at the baptismal font, whenever there's a baptism, you will see two circles. There's the inner circle, which is usually the parents and the godparents, and then there's the outer circle, the grandparents and the other extended family members. And at every baptism, you will see cell phones galore. And they'll be using those to take pictures. And at every baptism, you'll see water, and you'll see oil, and you'll see candles, and you will see baptismal garments. At every baptism, you will see the family that gathers around this child and lifts them up to the Lord. And at every baptism, if you listen carefully, you'll hear those same words we heard in today's gospel. You are my beloved son. You are my beloved daughter. With you I am well pleased. Now you might say, Father Steve, I've been at lots of baptisms and I've never heard that. And I will say to you, you weren't listening. Because it happens. It happens at every baptism. And I'm always amazed. Why? Because God rejoices, and God never tires of all the baptisms that happen here at the Church of St. Mary and around the world. Why? Because God chooses and calls and invites and makes this child one of his own, a beloved son, a beloved daughter. Baptisms are incredible, and they're wonderful experiences that bring great joy. And over this past year, I recall several baptisms that were incredibly unique. One of them, of course, was a child who came and his parents put him in a garment, a baptismal garment, that was over 100 years old. Imagine that. A baptismal garment that had been worn by generations of the same family, handed down from one to the next to the next. I was scared to death to hold the baby because I was afraid I was going to rip the garment. But nonetheless, it reminded me of how the old and the young are interconnected. And then there was the baptism of the particular child that the godparents, of course, were kind of fun people. And of course, the godfather was convinced. He had been practicing for weeks his Marlon Brando interpretation of the movie Godfather, with that rough, gruff voice. And so the time came when I asked him, along with the godmother, the question, are you ready to help these parents in their duty as Christian parents? And he blew it. He absolutely blew it. He forgot what it was he was supposed to say. And the godmother, why she came to his rescue, she simply said, "We are." And the godfather looked at his sister, who was the mother, and he mouthed to her, "I am willing to help." And then, of course, there was the baptism of the child who was fussing a little bit. Parents are scared to death that their children are going to cry during baptism. But this particular child was fussing a little bit, and why all of a sudden her dad was holding her, and she took her fist and she wrapped it around his little pinky with one hand. And then with the other hand, she was like directing an orchestra of some kind. And I kept thinking, I wonder what song she hears that the rest of us are not hearing. But I believe there was some kind of song that was playing in her mind and in her life. She perhaps could hear the angels and the saints singing at the glory of her now becoming one with them and with our God as a beloved child of God. But nonetheless, there she was, conducting the orchestra and the melody of the voices with one hand. But it was that hand, that little tiny fist of hers, that was wrapped around the pinky of her dad. And that's the image, my friends, that I would offer to all of us as we celebrate tonight this feast of the baptism of the Lord. Because the truth is, baptism is about a relationship that makes you and I God's beloved sons and daughters. You remember the voice that Jesus hears at the end of today's gospel. And you know, we are convinced, because of course we have been reading the scriptures for as long as we've been reading them, that we are convinced that Jesus knew exactly who he was and what he was going to be about, like from the moment he came from his mother's womb. I don't think that's the case. I think Jesus was as surprised to hear that voice at his baptism as you and I are. Because I don't think Jesus knew exactly what it was that he was supposed to be doing and all that he was going to be asked to undertake and all that his mission was going to entail. But nonetheless, he was open. He was open to the Spirit. He was open to what the dove might do on top of his head. He was open to the voice that came from the heavens that said, "You are my beloved Son. With you I am well pleased." Baptism is about a relationship with God. And so even though parents and godparents and grandparents and other family members are standing at the font wanting to capture that moment on their cell phones, to take a picture, to capture that moment in which this son or daughter became a child of God, my friends, we can't capture it as hard as we try, because we always live in the eternal now. And as much as we want to capture the moment, that moment is gone. And we live in this eternal now, which invites you and I then to be in this relationship with God, not as an individual seeker, not as someone who's an exile wandering, trying to find God all by ourselves. No, the baptism and the gift that we celebrate today with the feast of the baptism of the Lord is the fact that we have the ability to grab on to God's pinky, and we hold on tight. And be through that touch, through that moment in which you and I, every single day, hang on to God's pinky, why then his life, his heartbeat can be felt and can be experienced and can be a part of our life. And then we don't have to do this alone. We hang on to God's pinky, and we do that by living in community, by recognizing the power of that inner circle, our parents and our grandparents, and the power and the need for that outer circle of the other family members and grandparents and those that, of course, are close to our family. It is those circles that enable you and I to be able to each and every day strive to be the person that God has called and chosen and invited us to be, his beloved sons and daughters. So on this, the feast of the baptism of the Lord, we give thanks to God for the gift of water, for the gift of oil, for the gift of light, for the gift of baptismal garments. We give thanks to God for the gift of family and parents and godparents and those who help to form us in the faith. We thank God for those inner and those outer circles that help to form us and to fashion us and to encourage us and to give us the strength each and every day to be the living presence of Jesus Christ in our world. We give thanks to God for the life that is within us. And most importantly, we give thanks to God for the community of believers that we become through the waters of baptism. And we give thanks to God for his pinky that we can grab a hold of with one hand, knowing that he is with us, that he loves us, and that he leads us to the eternal now. And with the other hand, while we hear the song and we hear the voice, "You are my beloved son, my beloved daughter. With you I am well pleased." And with joy, we direct the orchestra.